Hi everyone, Al the Psych here. I have a video for you today for informational purposes only. It's basically a quick review, very quick review of part of a book called What Doesn't Kill Us, The New Psychology of Post-Traumatic Growth. And this is by Stephen Joseph from 2011. A lot of the information will be, direct from the book. Other times I'll paraphrase, and of course I can throw in my own 2 cents as well. So I just picked out a couple of gems that I thought were important. So he mentions three existential themes at the heart of post-traumatic growth. Number one, the recognition that life is uncertain and that things change, and this amounts to tolerance of uncertainty. This is really kind of like a Stoic philosophy here. Number two, psychological mindfulness, which reflects self-awareness and an understanding of how one's thoughts, emotions, and behaviors are related to each other, as well as a flexible attitude toward personal change. Again, mindfulness, that sounds like we've got Stoicism meets Eastern philosophy here. And number three, acknowledgement of personal agency, as he puts it, which entails a sense of responsibility for the choices one makes in life and an awareness that choices have consequences. Okay, so we accept that responsibility for the choices that we make. All right. Now, the author states that it's important to note that the definition of trauma has evolved, and it references, going back to DSM back in 1980. So the definition now has to accommodate the fact that people experience the same event differently. So it should not be defined by the external occurrence, not by the event, but in terms of the survivor's perceptions of what happened to them. Okay, what affects one person may not affect another person. Okay, so remember also that an individual can be traumatized by witnessing an event. You don't have to be directly involved in the event. You can just see it. You could even just see it on TV. And it does not anymore, it does not have to be outside the range of unusual human experience, as used to be the case in terms of diagnosing. So, we've really evolved in terms of, our definition of trauma. Okay, so to get to post-traumatic growth, an individual does have to experience some level of post-traumatic stress. Doesn't necessarily mean that you have to meet criteria for PTSD. Okay. Now, post-traumatic growth comes from the process of accommodation. Our way of looking at the world is modified rather than assimilation, in which we try to fit in what happened, into our mental schema, even if it doesn't fit. And I've got a video on specifically accommodation and assimilation as it relates to post-traumatic growth. Now, initially, after a traumatic event, denial may actually be a good coping strategy, according to the author. However, months later, higher growth was reported among those individuals that reported an increase in acceptance and positive reframing as their ways of coping. So initially, yeah, maybe I'm going to deny some things or deny the impact of the incident. But if I want to get to, a higher level of functioning and coping and post-traumatic growth, eventually, I'm going to have to get to that acceptance of what happened, and reframe it, come up with my own narrative of what happened. Okay. Now, the author talks about a couple of different coping um, strategies or avenues. He mentions task-focused coping. Um, I come up with a strategy about what to do. So the situation will not change unless they do something about it. That change is desirable. Okay, so that's task-focused coping. Then he mentioned emotion-focused coping. So this is what we need to do when our distress is overwhelming as this form of coping helps us manage our feelings. And so this would be like exercise, relaxation, talking things out with others, things like that. Now, I'm going to end it on this note here. He mentions that support is helpful, um, but sometimes family and friends may not be supportive in the way that they should be. So, for example, sometimes they may offer advice when advice is the last thing that you want. Maybe you just want to be listened to. And, I know that, when I was working as a therapist, I had this tendency, my shirt shows it, how to fix stuff. I wanted to just kind of jump in and, get to the meat of the problem and work on it and fix it. And I had to learn to just back off a little bit, and let therapy unfold, at a pace in which the client was comfortable with. I don't want to make it so uncomfortable that the client's not going to show up the following week. Okay. So, sometimes there's a tendency to want to help and jump in and fix things, and maybe that's not where the individual is at that point in time. Maybe we're told not to cry when that's what we want to do at that time. Okay, so sometimes being supportive can be a little tricky. All right. So if you happen to find yourself in a supportive role, you may want to navigate how to be supportive. Maybe even asking how, what do you need from me right now? Something along those lines. And if you're the person that needs support, if possible, you may actually need to or want to tell your support person, I just need you to listen right now. Okay, or I just need a shoulder to cry on or something along those lines. May be a little difficult, based upon the situation you may be in, but it might pay dividends for you. Anyway, that's it for now. Thanks.